What's going on, guys? Right Army Teacher in the house, and I am here with the EDL week number 5. Your Royal Bomber for Bombies are taking on the Seattle Galarian Stunfisks and Coach Skinny Biscuit in an epic week 5 matchup. We've of course played Skinny quite a few times. He did recently beat me in the ADL, but this time round I'm not sure he's going to have a similar result because his team is kind of unusual in Draft League. We don't see this very often where he's more or less drafted mono ice. With a couple of little additions here and there. It's an interesting team, does match up relatively average against my team, so we'll see what he does bring. I'm not really sure what 6 he would want to bring. There are definitely some Pokemon that I think he can bring, but I'm not too sure. Now, in terms of situation for the league, basically if I lose a series I'm out. If I win all 3 of my games, including beating Solo in the last week, and other results go my way, mathematically I can still make playoffs. So we are going to make a bit of a go of it here. I do need to break this team as best as possible. It's going to be tricky, so let's talk about his team. First up is the Hail Setter. I think he does bring is going to be Vanilluxe. Vanilluxe is actually slightly faster than some of my team, particularly looking at Slurpuff and Pangoro. And does actually hit ridiculously hard. Choice Specs, 100% accurate Blizzards, really do rip through my team, so that's something I do need to watch out for. However, I can Dynamax a couple of Pokemon which can take it on, so will be interesting to see what he goes for here. I do have a little bit of a strategy to mitigate that speed increase, but yeah, I'll show you that when it comes to my actual team. But nonetheless, Vanilluxe is pretty solid, does get Flash Cannon as well, which hits Slurpuff pretty hard. But yeah, those Blizzards are really going to hurt. Now, he could run Icicle Plate instead, so he can switch between moves, especially running Freeze Dry for something like Ludicolo, for example. And potentially a Silvally type, depending on what I bring. But yeah, I think he more likely runs Specs or Life Orb, or potentially Choice Scarf if he thinks I'm going to Scarf a couple of things to try and outspeed, which I might do, but I'm hesitant to do that, and I'll explain why in a bit. Next up is Weavile. Weavile took a little bit of an unfortunate hit. It no longer gets access to knockoff in this gen, so that's something to bear in mind. So its best Dark-type stab now is Throat Chop, which is still a solid move. Base 80 power, does a bit of damage, but it's not quite as effective as knockoff was. So, but nonetheless, does still get Ice Shard, does still get Low Kick, does still get Icicle Crash. It can be really, really powerful, especially with a Choice Banded set. Does also get Pressure, of course, to Pressure Stall me out, especially if I try and hold him out. I'm not convinced about Weavile coming, because I do have things like Pangoro, Doublade. Slurpuff takes it on really well, as does Double. Double can really shut down Weavile, particularly if it's fully physically bulky. But I think Weavile's too good a cleaner not to bring, so I think he does bring it anyway. Next up is the Coffee Table, Avalugg. Really physically bulky mon, does have a really good physical attack stat as well, and absolutely excels in Trick Room, does get the Ice Body ability, so it gets free leftovers if Hail's up. Can be really strong, very weak on the special side however, and that is something that I might be able to exploit, I might not. It's kind of tricky. I do think Avalugg is really good against my team, so I think he brings it, I think he has to bring it. But he does need to be mindful of some of my sneaky special threats. I can definitely run things like Special Silvally, which can definitely catch him off guard. So that's something to watch out for. Next up is his best pivot, in my opinion, is that Rotom. Rotom Frost, pretty okay. Ice Electric's not the best typing in the world defensively, but nonetheless can hit pretty hard, particularly running a Choice Specs. Specs Blizzard does a lot to me, as I've said with Vanilluxe. It's kind of even more true with Rotom. Gets Volt Switch, of course, can be Willow Hex. A lot of Rotoms so far in Gen 8 have been wearing Will-O-Wisp Hex. Wouldn't be too surprised to see that, but yeah. I think he most likely brings like a bulkier pivot set, but it's not the best set for Rotom. Next up is Arctovish. He had it in the ADL as well. He's got it here. This thing's a monster in Trick Room. Trick Room Vicious Rend is brutal. Does hit really, really hard. I don't really have much that can take it, to be honest with you. Potentially max defensive double can take one, but it doesn't necessarily kill back. So that's something to watch out for. But yeah, it only really excels in Trick Room because it is very slow, so that's something to bear in mind. I have slow mons on my team as well, which could dissuade him from bringing Trick Room. However, I don't think he can afford not to bring it. And the reason I don't think he can afford not to bring it is because he's got Mr. Rhyme, which is another mon he also had in the ADL. So, not too surprised to see it. That screen cleaner potentially breaking my screens. I have potentially brought screen sets in the past, but I couldn't afford to bring it because of the Mr. Rhyme. Nonetheless, this thing hits incredibly hard, surprisingly. It's got a really decent special attack stat. It's kind of slow though, but does actually not outslow some of my team. So that might be an issue for him bringing Trick Room, because I could just run HP on some of my mons like Pangoro, which naturally are undersped by it. So he might be dissuaded, but nonetheless, I think Trick Room is a viable threat. I think Mr. Rhyme is hard enough hitting that it could justify bringing it. It does, of course, have neutrality to fighting because of that psychic typing, so could be interesting. I'm not too convinced, though. Next up, of course, is his mascot, Galarian Stunfisk. I don't know how much this can afford to come. Now, he did bring it before against me when I didn't think it would come. I won't be surprised if he did again. Good rock setter, of course, does get Sucker Punch, so it can be pretty useful, but I'm not too sure. It's kind of a tricky one to place, given the fact that I do have things like Ludicolo. I can run Silvally that can easily take it on relatively well, and things like Double can also take it on, as can Pangoro. Doublade can also take it on relatively well, so I do have good answers for it. I'm not too convinced by it, but it could come as a sort of Boltoned check, if you like, if I try and Thunderfang something. But yeah, I'm not sure. It's a hard one to call. I think he might bring it. The next one's really hard to call for me as well, is Milotic. Milotic, one of the few non-ice types on this team. Really, really good with that Marvel scale, giving that somewhat average physical defense and much needed buff. Does have to run like Flame Orb to make that work though, because he can't afford to run Toxic Orb and he can't really risk me statusing it. But nonetheless, really bulky, does still get Recover, does still get things like Haze, so it can prevent me from setting up, especially with something like Doublade, for example. Can be potentially really scary. I would not be too surprised to see Milotic come, but I'm a bit on the fence. Next up, I don't think comes to this match, is Abomasnow. Abomasnow also a Hell Setter, but far weaker than Vanillux, in my opinion. That 4 times weakness to fire could definitely cause issues. And I do have plenty of fire coverage on my team. Yes, I don't actually have a dedicated fire type, unless my Silvally is fire. But yeah, nonetheless, I do think Abomasnow is not quite strong enough to play against my team. I can definitely hit it incredibly hard, and he doesn't have good ways to respond back to a lot of my big hitters, so I'm not too convinced. Last up is Lapras. If this was Dynamaxable, I would think it would come, but otherwise I'm not too convinced. Bolton really ruins Lapras, and so does Pangoro, so I don't really see where Lapras can fit in. Obviously having Water Absorb is nice, and obviously having, I think it's got Shell Armor, which is also a nice ability, but nonetheless, it doesn't really have the surviving power to really break through any of my team, so I'm not too convinced it can afford to come. But this is Skinny. He does tend to bring some things out of left field, so I'm not too convinced at all, but we will see. So, let's talk about my team. First up, coming back after a successful week 1 for me, is Slurpuff. Running physical this week, which is a risk. I'm fully aware that this is a risk, especially with that Avalugg, but nonetheless, I feel like the physical may be slightly better because everything except Avalugg really does not take Play Rough plus Drain Punch very well. Sticky Web, of course, is there for things like the Vanillux to try and catch it out. And Facade is, of course, there in case I get burned or toxic or whatever. I do expect burn to be a thing in this match, so having Facade will be a common feature with a few of my mons this week. Max HP is actually going to allow me to live a Choice Specs hit from the Vanillux, which is something I couldn't do with speed, so I needed the HP investment this week. The Unburden will mean I outspeed it though, well, once I've procced the Citrus Berry, of course, which I can easily do that once I actually live a hit. I can take it on the switch, heal up with the Citrus Berry, take the hail damage, and then I'm faster, and then Drain Punch has somewhat of a chance to kill. It's kind of tricky. I do need some chip damage, but I can potentially kill it, which is good to know. Slurpuff hits a lot of this team really hard. The only thing it doesn't necessarily beat is the Mr. Rhyme and the Stunfisk. Not too convinced that the Stunfisk can come, but if it does come, I do need to watch out for it. Next up is going to be one of my biggest carries so far. Is going to be Doublade. Doublade is really, really powerful here. With the Eviolite, I can tank pretty much anything. With Sword Stance, and of course at +2, I really do ruin things. Given the fact I can Dynamax, Slurpuff, and Doublade, which is a pointer, it's worth pointing out his Dynamax mons are Milotic, Weavile, and Broton Frost. I'm not sure about Milotic coming, but the other two I think do come. Doublade kind of beats a lot of this team. With Sacred Sword, instead of close combat, I can ignore any stat changes, which is why I have it. So if the Avalugg tries setting up Iron Defense as a way to try and stop me killing it, Sacred Sword doesn't care, so I can still hit it incredibly hard. Running no speed, of course, because of Trick Room, but I do have Shadow Sneak there in case Mr. Rhyme is in. But yeah, after Sword Stance, just nothing on this team takes Sacred Sword plus Iron Head, and Shadow Sneak is a good revenge killer in case he does try to Trick Room, but I am naturally slower than the majority of his team anyway. So yeah, Doublade, very powerful, very strong in this matchup, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing if I can put the work in again. Next up's going to be the other big carry of this team is going to be Pangoro. Pangoro is debating on putting HP on this thing instead of speed. That might be a change I do during the battle. But running Banded Iron Fist, Drain Punch, Bullet Punch, Darkest Lariat, Thunder Punch. Darkest Lariat, of course, ignores stat changes as well. Drain Punch does a hell of a lot of damage. Bullet Punch is a good revenge killer. Thunder Punch is there mostly for Milotic. Also there for Lapras, of course, if he brings it, but yeah. This set's pretty powerful. This set hits the majority of his team. Again, I might change the speed investment to HP because this doesn't outspeed Vanillux regardless, even if I was Jolly Nature, so that's something I do need to watch out for. But nonetheless, fairly solid mon. So I'm looking forward to seeing how much Pangoro does. Bullet Punch just does so much work here. I'm hopeful that Pangoro just puts in the work. Next up on the team is going to be a new boy this week. Is going to be Double. Double is actually very interesting in this matchup because of a very important move here, Body Press. Body Press, if you didn't know, is a new move that came out in this gen that actually does damage based off your defense stat as opposed to your attack stat. Which is kind of interesting because Double has base 100 defense anyway. So by running fully physically defensive and Cotton Guard, I can really amp up that Body Press damage. Of course, 2 Cotton Guards puts me up +6, which is insane as it is. Body Press does a hell of a lot of damage to everything on this team that's not called Milotic. So I think this is probably going to be the most influential mon this week. I think he has to expect this set, but at the same time, I don't think he has the best responses to it except Vanillux, but Vanillux can't really switch in on a Body Press, so that's definitely something to know. Facade is there, of course, in case I get status and Protect, just to see if I can get some longevity with that leftovers, as always. Next up is going to be Silvally. Running Silvally Fighting this week. I debated on Fire, but I think Fighting is slightly better, just because if I do run Fire, then I'm kind of weak to Arctivish, I'm kind of weak to Milotic and Lapras, which I didn't really want. Fighting gives me a little bit more options. That multi-attack really does hit hard. Parting Shot's also nice, especially on the Arctivish, because if I can reduce that thing's stats, that Fisher Surrender's not doing that much, which is nice. Multi-attack ruins a lot of his team. U-turn, actually, he is kind of annoying for the Mr. Rhyme. The Mr. Rhyme doesn't appreciate it. And Facade, of course, in case I get status as normal. But yeah, this thing potentially puts in a lot of work, so I'm definitely looking forward to making good use of it. Mostly pivoting, of course. If I can get things like my Doublade and my Pangoro in, I generally just win, so we're going to see how that goes. Speaking of winning, the last Pokemon on my team is going to be Boltund. Boltund, outside of Trick Room, is a monster in this matchup. With that Strong Jaw powering up all of my Fang moves and biting moves, it just hurts so much. Fire Fang ruins the majority of this team. Thunder Fang hits the things that Fire Fang's not super effective against, and Crunch, of course, is there for Mr. Rhyme. Play Rough is a nice neutral to hit. It does actually hit the Weavile really hard, but I don't necessarily need Play Rough. I can just hit it with Fire Fang. But Play Rough is there as it's a nice little useful move that I otherwise would not have known how to fill. Unfortunately, I did notice that this thing doesn't get Ice Fang, which is kind of interesting. I didn't really see any other Fang moves I really liked, so we ran Play Rough, just in case. But yeah, this thing is very fast, of course, with that 121 base speed. With that max speed, I don't need to run Scarf on this thing, because he doesn't really have that much that can really compete with me speed-wise. I think the fastest thing he has on his team is Weavile, so I think Weavile is 110 speed, so I don't think Weavile can actually outspeed me anyway, unless he's Scarfed, and even if he is Scarfed, I don't think he can actually one-shot me with anything, so worth noting, definitely worth pointing out, but yeah, I think Boltund really wrecks this team. So yeah, that's going to be our team, that's going to be what we're bringing. Here's hoping that this best of 3 goes well for us, but yeah. Meanwhile, I'll jump straight to the battle and I'll show you guys what happens. So, see you in a bit. Alright guys, here we are back with the battles. This is of course going to be a best of 3 series. As you can see, looking at his team, he didn't bring Weavile, Milotic, or Mr. Rhyme, which I'm kind of surprised by. Honestly, this team is heavily weak to the majority of mine. The only things that kind of don't really go in that hard here is Boltund and Slurpuff, but the rest of my mons can really start to put in work in this game. So let's show you game 1, and let's see what happens. Okay, so with this, I lead Double here. Double's actually kind of an interesting setup. I figured he would lead the Stunfisk and try and get up rocks, so I just go immediately for Cotton Guard, as we do see Thunder Wave, which is no big deal. Double is not fast anyway, so paralysis doesn't really matter. But I am already at +6 at turn 2, and this is a big mistake from him. He tries to switch in his Rotom Boss. I'm assuming this was physically bulky, but of course we get Parahaxed. Little unfortunate. He does actually trick me into a Scarf, which is actually the biggest misplay of the game for him, is actually just one-shots the Rotom. This is a big problem for him now. He goes into Beefcake here, which is his Abomasnow, but because he gave me a Scarf, even though I was paralyzed, I was actually still faster than it. I'm assuming that was a max HP, max special attack set, because he definitely could have outsped me, but he didn't. But either way, he does get a Aurora Veil here, which is kind of annoying, but again, I'm +6 with Body Press, and this is a fully physically defensive Double. This thing is hitting at max power right now, and there's really not a lot he can do about this. Goes into the Fish, which does take a Body Press, only just. As you can see, that's through Aurora Veil, but Fisher's Rend does literally nothing, because I am maxed out in defense. We do see the Ice Body, which is interesting, but again, Body Press goes down. Fish is gone, just left with Avalugg and Stunfisk. Out comes the Avalugg. Now, honestly, this thing had potential to stall me out regardless. But as you can see, he does go for the Body Press here, which is good tech for me to know that he has the Body Press, so he could potentially set up. But as you can see, this Body Press through Aurora Veil really doesn't do a lot. Does half though, which is good to know, because now when the Aurora Veil is gone, that actually means that my Body Press would kill, but we unfortunately get Parahax. He does get another bit of chip on me, but nothing significant at this point. The Leftovers recovery is not enough. Another Body Press connects and will kill. Free kill here. And he's only left with a Stunfisk, which cannot take a hit under any circumstances. I am faster due to the Scarf, and we take a one-shot. Double picked up a clean 6-0 in game 1, which is super nice. Not a bad start for me. Now, it looked like, in all honesty, he didn't really have a good answer for Double, so let's go into game 2. Now, again, I have no reason not to lead this Double, because why would I lead anything else? He does lead Abomasnow at this point, which was good to know. I do get the Cotton Guard up, I try and set it up again, but as you can see, he is Focus Blast. He is Life Orb, Max Special Attack, Modest Nature, basically. That's what this Abomasnow is. So my Double's gone, but I can quite happily go to Boltund here, click Fire Fang. I'm Choice Banded, so this thing 1,000,000% dies. There's nothing he can do to take that. So Boltund picks up its first kill of the game. The Fish comes in. I do go for the Fire Fang again, just to fish for a burn, just to make sure Fisher's Rend doesn't do that much. But he actually goes for Icicle Crash, which is an interesting play on his part. I think it probably does more damage than Fisher's Rend at this point anyway, but I'm not 100% sure. I still think Fisher's Rend is slightly stronger. But I go into my Doublade here, and this was a kind of a mistake to go into Doublade, but nonetheless, we do go for the play here. With Doublade in, I can Dynamax this on whatever comes in, and click a Max Knuckle, which is going to hit pretty hard. You can see it does a decent chunk to the Stunfisk, but with a +1 attack, I guarantee kill it next turn. So no big deal. He goes for Sucker Punch, but because I'm a Violet, he does very little damage to me, and the Max Knuckle will pick up the kill on the Stunfisk. not a bad play for me. We're in an okay position here. He goes into fish. Kind of surprised to see the fish, to be honest. He does go for the crunch, but you can see it does next to nothing. And this Max Knuckle will pick up the kill. The crit didn't matter. The roll guaranteed killed, even if he was fully physically defensive. So I was not too concerned about this. So now I've got a Doublade at +3 attack. He goes into Vanillux here, which is a good play on his part. This Icicle Crash did next to nothing, as you can see, but he does show Life Orb again, which is good news. But unfortunately, he flinched me, which actually is a big problem. Because the more he flinches me, the lower the health my Doublade is. And that's a real problem. Because I need Doublade for Avalugg, so... well, I didn't realize I needed it until this point. The Doublade, of course, kills the Vanillux. Here comes the Rotom, which is Choice Scarfed. We knew this from before. He does actually Dynamax it, which is kind of a weird play because it loses the actual buff. But I go for Shadow Sneak for damage here. This was my big misplay that cost me the game. Because without Doublade, I potentially can't beat the Avalugg. But nonetheless, we go to Boltund here. Good chance of picking up a kill here, but as you can see, he's got HP investment on this thing. So the Fire Fang unfortunately doesn't pick up the kill, and Boltund goes down. But we can still potentially win this, but it's very, very difficult. I go on a Slurpuff here, which was kind of a mistake on my end. You see how much that Hailstorm did so much damage. We do get the Drain Punch here, and we do pick up the kill. But unfortunately, this is kind of where the good news ends. Because Avalugg being left, I had 3 physical attackers against a physical wall. So, as you can see, this Drain Punch is doing nothing. And we do see the Iron Defense, which of course gives him +2 defense. Now, this also powers up the Body Press, so at this point, I knew the game was lost, because there was literally nothing I can do. If he sets up to +6, the game's over. And unfortunately, I don't really have anything that can really hit this Avalugg all that hard. So you can see I'm hitting it. Basically, at this point, I knew the game was over, so I'm just kind of trying to scout out his sets. So I know he has the Ice Body on this thing. I know he has Iron Defense and Body Press, which is good to know. He actually shows Recover here, which is really good information for me. This now means that he either doesn't have an Ice-type stab or he doesn't have Earthquake. And you see this Body Press is doing way too much. I can't deal with this anymore, unfortunately. I do try and get some damage off, but you can see I'm doing pitiful damage. This Avalugg can actually just come in and cleanly reverse sweep me. But it's not a big deal because Double picked up a 6-0 in the first match. So losing 1-0 doesn't really matter. We're still +5 on the differential regardless. You can see this Moldy Attack just does nothing. At this point, I just cannot touch this thing. He just kills my entire team. Which kind of sucks, but I do have really good information here. Now, I don't know this Avalugg's last move at this point. But I hazard a guess it was probably Ice Stab, which doesn't really hit Doublade all that much. So we do lose this one, a little bit unfortunate, but we got some very good information about it. So let's go to game 3. At this point, I made the adaptation that I figured I'd lead with Silvally, because at the very least I can pivot on anything that's not called Rotom, because Rotom is the only thing faster than me. But he leads Vanillux, and then the multi-attack just one-shots it, so his Hail Set is already gone, or at least one of them. He does still have a Bomber Snow, which is definitely worth pointing out. He actually goes into Rotom, which of course is Scarfed, so I can directly switch out into Slurpuff here. And he goes for the Blizzard, props my Citrus Berry, and we are in an okay position here. I've got Unburden Boost, which is nice, so I can Dynamax here. I will be faster than this Rotom in theory, but unfortunately I'm not, and he gets the Freeze. Now, the reason I wasn't faster is because I realized I was not max speed on this thing. I went for max HP in case Mr. Rhyme came. But you can see we do thaw out instantly, but we're too low health. We cannot survive another Blizzard, even in Dynamax. But I do try and stall out as much as possible, just to try and stall the Hail out mostly, because the Hail is a big problem. So unfortunately, Slurpuff really didn't get to do anything in this game, which sucks. Not gonna lie, it really sucks. But Boltund can come in. He will Dynamax his Rotom again. Pretty good choice to Dynamax the Rotom, honestly, because this Fire Fang had a chance to kill otherwise. We do see the Max Hailstorm, which just obliterates Boltund. Boltund, of course, unfortunately, really frail. Not a very, very bulky Pokemon at all. I do go into my Silvally, though. Because he's Dynamaxed, he loses the speed buff from the Scarf. So my Silvally is actually faster. at this point because my Savali is actually speed invested. He goes for double max guard. Unfortunately, he misses it, so this multi-attack is going to pick up the kill. We're in a very decent position here. 4-4 is fine, but crucially, I still have my double aid for the Avalugg, which is really important. He actually brings it out here, which is kind of interesting. My multi-attack did a decent chunk to him, which is good to know. He does set up the iron defense, as expected. But at this point, I'm thinking, what does he have as his last move? We've already seen the iron defense, body press, and recover. So I was trying to see if I can bait him into showing me another move here. Unfortunately, he doesn't. But I can still keep going for multi-attacks here because I'm doing meaningful damage still. Unless he goes for recover, which he does. But at this point, he's not really showing me any reason to believe he has Earthquake. So I go for Parting Shot here, which doesn't really do that much, but I can go straight into my double aid here. As he does set up 2+6 defense with that iron defense. He's at a good amount of health, but I can set up a Swords Dance here. Now, if he doesn't click Earthquake, we're in a good spot. But he actually goes for Body Press here, not realizing I'm a Ghost type, apparently, or thinking I was going to switch out. But he does actually make the switch into the Bomber Snow, in which case I can set up another Swords Dance, which was a little bit greedy. I could potentially have just gone straight for the Sacred Sword, but knowing he's faster than me, going for the Blizzard, he does actually crit me, which is kind of meaningful, but not super meaningful, but the Sacred Sword picks up the kill. Potentially, he would not have been able to live anyway, so it would have been okay to go whatever. Does go into Stunfisk, probably wants to Sucker Punch me, but I can go into double here. Not really that concerned, as you do see the Sucker Punch. Now at this point, I can freely go for Cotton Guard, because I will be a turn ahead of this Avalugg, regardless of it coming in. Which you do see me go for here. I did want to see how much this Body Press damage did to an uninvested Avalugg. So we do go for it. It does a huge amount of damage, which is good to know, as he does unfortunately set up the iron defense. Now at this point in the game, it's kind of a little bit of a stall fest. Because at this point, unfortunately, he lived this body press. This was a roll. He could potentially have died to it, but it was extremely unlikely. Had I got the roll there, this thing would have been a lot easier. But I set up to +6 because I can, pretty much. And then at this point, it's just a case of stalling him out of his recovery, stalling him out of his body presses, and trying to get as much as possible until he shows me his last move, which is what I really want to see. Because I'm still not convinced he didn't have Earthquake on this thing. But as you can see, I'm doing meaningful damage even at +6. Due to being fully physically defensive, it helps me out an awful lot here. I can just keep going for body press until he shows me his move. He does go for body press of his own, does 20%, which is a decent chunk. But leftovers is enough to help me stall out. So I can keep going for these body presses, force him into recovering. Which is not a bad position. But yeah, had I had something like Toxic on something on my team, can't remember if any of my team gets it. I share to Protect because I expect him to body press here, just to try and stall him out of his damage moves. I don't know if I can see it. You can see here he still has 12 recovers and 13 body presses, which is a lot. I do actually show Facade to save my body press PP, just in case I need double for the Arctivish or the Stunfisk. But yeah, at this point I can just keep stalling him out of moves until I see his last move. I'm trying to make him show it, so it gives me an idea of what I'm dealing with here. At this point he finally shows that Rapid Spin, which means 100% confirmed that he cannot touch my double blade with this Avalugg, which is good to know, so I go straight back into it. No reason not to, as he does try to Rapid Spin again, but it doesn't matter, because even at +1 speed he is still not going to be able to do anything to my double blade. Goes into Arctivish, which was an aggressive switch. I do go straight for that Sacred Sword. Now this thing is actually faster than me, so I can easily switch out into my Savali. Does go for the Crunch, which I resist. Does crit me. Doesn't really matter. Now I can just freely multi-attack and the Arctivish is gone. Not bad for us. Really solid position. We still have the double blade this time, which we didn't have last time. Does actually go back into the Avalugg, so I just U-turn straight out into double blade. I have no reason not to. Every time this Avalugg is out, I can just freely click double blade. I had Sacred Sword on this thing for that very reason. I expected him to switch out here, so I actually made the play to Swords Dance. He could Sucker Punch me here, but it doesn't kill. But I do make the safer play. I don't need Savali at this point, So I quite happily go into my Silvally here, predicting the Earthquake, and I do actually live it, and the Sucker Punch will kill. No big deal. Silvally going down doesn't really matter that much. I go to Pangoro here. Pangoro's not really had much to do this game except die in game 1. Game 2 rather. The Drain Punch picks up a kill. Pangoro, the big man, just comes in. And now with Avalugg being purely on its own, I just go into Doublade, which can set up all day long. There is nothing this Avalugg can do. Doublade is freely in here. We do end it with a little bit of fun. He will potentially just go straight to +6, but it doesn't matter. Sacred Sword actually ignores stat changes, which is why I took it over Curse Combat this week. But I can freely set up as much as I want. These Sword Stances are there just to guarantee the kills, because quite a decent defense. Avalugg can still actually live hits. Sacred Sword, of course, not being a stab move really doesn't help it, but look how much this does. Bang. Gone. This is the problem when you didn't have a sturdy Avalugg. He had Ice Body to try and get more longevity, but either way, we do actually pick up a nice 3-0 win in Game 3, which effectively means we gain +8 differential from these 3 matches, which is incredibly strong. It actually puts us in a very, very good position for playoffs. Basically, what happens here is if I beat Solo, and by a good margin, there's a high chance I make playoffs, which was quite shocking considering I'm the last in the league when I took over this team. But yeah, Solo is in phenomenal form though. He's one of the strongest players in the league this season. So I'm not really expecting much, in all honesty. But we'll give it a go. We'll see what we can do. I'm sure Solo will give us a good game. He gave us a very good game in the GPL. So hopefully we get some good games out of it. And if I don't make playoffs, so be it. You know, I wasn't really expecting to be in this position, to be honest with you, so I'm lucky that I'm here this far. But yeah, either way, good games to Skinnyman. Always a pleasure playing against you. You always give me some fun matches. But either way, I'm gonna get on out of here, so thank you so much for watching. My name is Robombi Teacher. I'm your coach at the Royal Bournemouth Robombis. Stay safe, stay awesome, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.